Everyone, welcome to my Session 5 teaching memo. It's officially daylight savings time, and I'm counting on all of you being refreshed from your extra hour of sleep on Saturday night, although I'm sure some of you stayed out a little later just because you had an extra hour to sleep. Hell has indeed frozen over. The Cubs have won the World Series, and Chicago is going crazy. Of course, there were some former Red Sox involved in that. John Lester, I think John Lackey was involved in that, and Theo Epstein, and former Red Sox GM, engineered it. My football season ends this Saturday. I'll be officiating the Dayton Marist football game, the finish to my 30th season of roughing college football, and not my last. And lastly, I put my bird feeders out yesterday. Dr. Laura gave me the okay. So it's officially the cold season. And they've already found my feeder, and the squirrels have already found it. And this year, a chipmunk found it. So I'll be working to keep them away. All right, little housekeeping. I want to make a comment on the quiz discussion board. I created them and gave everyone a second chance to take the quizzes. Actually, you have 3 chances to take the quiz because you should download the hard copy, take it, then go into the quiz discussion board, talk about ones you are unsure of, then go take it the first time, then go back to the quiz discussion board and talk about ones you got wrong. Now, many of you don't want to take that much time, and that's fine. But the one thing is, don't just go in and talk about the ones you got right. I got this right, I got that right. That doesn't really help anybody. Go in and talk about the ones you got wrong, and then give people advice on the ones they struggle with. Okay, this is where I found the answer to that question. You can point them in the right direction. Don't give them the answer. All right, that's all I want to say about that. Although some of you are still just taking it twice. Taking it first, seeing what you got wrong, taking it again. And that's okay too. But you're defeating the purpose of why I'm doing it that way. But that's okay. On another point, occasionally you might find a link that doesn't work or an assignment that does not function properly. So please let me know either via email or and the help is on the way. Email is better because I'm very lax about checking help is on the way. But I try to do that. So I will fix it ASAP. I wanted to comment on the survey that was in the Session 5 assignments. Not everybody took it, but that's okay. It was not mandatory. But many of you did, and I appreciate that. It's a way that I can make any mid-course corrections that I might need to make. It doesn't look like I need to make too many this semester. But last semester I changed the discussion board rubric. Many of you may see now that there is a revised discussion board rubric, and I changed it to lengthen the period of time you can make your initial post and still get an A. It went from, I think, 3 or 4 to 7 days. So now you can still get an A for the timeliness for the initial post by posting it on the first Sunday of the session. All the discussion boards are open for 2 weeks. So if you are one of those people that only works on the course on the weekends, you can still make your initial post on Saturday or Sunday and still get an A. So some of you still feel that's not fair, but I want people to be involved in the discussion early. I get involved in discussion during the first week heavily, then I taper off a little on the second week, and I usually don't go on the last weekend. So I make probably 25 to 50 posts a session, and that's a lot. But I can't get involved with you folks that post on the last Saturday and Sunday. Somebody posted this session on Monday morning, so it was after 12 o'clock. Now, no one is going to get involved in that and have the ability to react to your comments. So So that's, I want to thank you folks that did that, that gave me feedback. I really appreciate it. And one final note, I'm still I'm still seeing too many. I have to change this in my. Um, I'm still seeing too many posts that I like your comments, quote unquote, posts, without citing the text, my presentation, or other relevant sources. These are okay as long as you have at least 4 posts that cite the text, my presentation, or websites that extend the conversation. So keep that in mind. So, harder than the Dickens, big ideas. The discussion board is closed, and it always makes me a little sad because this is really gets my students to really examine the pros and cons of large-scale tests. We're so used to bashing them, so used to saying, who are these inanimate people that create these things and know nothing about school or learning. So most of you know now the difference between a norm and the criterion reference test, like the SATs and the GREs, and a criterion reference test like our state assessments. The biggest thing is that you now know how much care goes into them. And many of you railed about the cost of them, but if you read the article I shared in course materials, you know that it was only 1/2 of 1% of a school's budget is spent on testing. So you have to keep that perspective in mind. It's like, I can't remember the number exactly, but I think it was $55 to $100 a teacher. So what could you as a teacher buy and not have those tests? And what have those tests brought to us? Well, they really shined a spotlight on schools that are struggling. We used to be able to hide those kids. We used to hide them in the average. We used to hide the special ed kids. We used to hide the ELL kids. And now we can't do that. Several of you read my short article, How Standard is Standardized Testing, and described the effort in it I described the efforts of my friend, who is now my wife, and her efforts to accommodate her testing situation according to her learning style. The point I was trying to make was how far we have to take standardization, making sure everyone takes it the same way. A few of you commented that teacher-made tests are better than large-scale tests because teachers can design their tests based on their students' ability and learning styles. I believe this is a misconception because if you start changing your test based on what you think your students should know, then you'll be doing them a disservice. And you will never be able to answer one of the 3 big questions: where am I going, where am I now, and how can I close the gap? Can we modify environmental preferences without damaging the overall integrity of the exam? I think it is a good idea. With the coming of computer adaptive testing, we may see the large-scale assessments embedded into the curriculum, taken when students are ready. Already, state ed is allowing everyone extra time to finish their assessments. Can more accommodations be on the way? We shall see. Several of you also discussed how teachers should become involved in creating our state assessments. Now that Pearson is out of the picture, Questars is partnering with state ed and is now soliciting teachers to be involved in not only review of the tests, but also item writing. So that is a good thing. I shared this letter, and if you click on it, the teaching memo, you can see the letter in which the authors solicit teachers to become involved in many different phases of the process. So those of you who felt teachers should be more involved, you got your wish. So I hope you found this discussion board worthwhile. I certainly think it was. I want to talk about session 6, which is about validity, and we're going to introduce the EdTPA special education. Here are the 5 learning targets. You can find them in the folder. Accurately define the three types of validity evidence. Describe two ways a classroom teacher can ensure content validity of a self-created test. Create a learning target that is specific and measurable. List the three main tasks of the EdTPA special education, and create 4 types of selected response questions: multiple choice, fill-in, matching, and true-false, to accurately assess the content of the EdTPA special education. This week we explore the second leg of the test creation triangle. Last session was reliability. This week is validity. You will learn from Popham that it is not the test itself that is valid, but the inferences that you can make about the results. A little different concept there than most of us are used to. You have several vocabulary words this week: consequential validity, content-related validity, and predictive validity. Remember to keep filling out your vocabulary in your own words as we go through the course. You will save yourself some angst at the end of the semester. Assignments this week. You have a quiz on reliability and validity. The hard copy is available in course materials. And again, you have two chances to take it. But I would suggest taking the hard copy first, as I mentioned before, going in, talking about ones you aren't sure of. Go take it online, then go back, and then do it a third time. This session we begin our performance task by becoming familiar with the EdTPA Special Ed. You should begin reading it and thinking about the 4 or 5 learning targets. Now, it's a very broad document, and you're not going to be able to zero in very well. I usually recommend looking at the rubrics, taking 4 of the rubrics and using them as as learning targets, or taking 3 of the rubrics and then having a vocabulary learning target, because there's a lot of vocabulary in the EdTPA. I've listed the 5 rubrics here. Rubric 11 is analyze the focused learner's performance. 12 is using feedback to guide further learning. 13, learner use of feedback. 14, explaining the focused learner's use of communication. And rubric 15, using assessment to inform instruction. Now, the reason I'm talking about these 5 is that these are the assessment rubrics in the EdTPA. So that's a suggestion. Of course, you don't have to listen to me. I just want you to create selected response tests that are aligned with 4 or 5 learning targets. What I find most important is the difference between a score, a 2 and a 3 in the rubrics, which is passing, and the difference between a 3 and a 4, which you would need to offset any score of 2 you may receive. I believe the technical aspects of the EdTPA, such as the 3 tasks, how many videos, permissions you need, etc., are really not big ideas. Everybody will know that. Everybody's cooperating teacher, everybody's supervising teacher will be able to tell you that. So I know you're going to ask questions about those because they're easy. How many videos do you need? How long do they have to be? And those are knowledge type questions. That's okay. They will not affect your grade, other than the fact that in the rubric says you need a certain amount of reasoning questions, and those kind of questions that I just mentioned are knowledge type. So keep that in mind when you're creating your questions. The most difficult task my students have in previous semesters has been in creating 4 or 5 learning targets on which to base their questions. Targets need to be specific and measurable. Of course, I have provided resources to help you do this. There are 3 documents embedded in the assignment instructions. So I will go into there and find it. I've also placed a video in course materials on how to create the select response test, along with an exemplar that I talk about in the video. I suggest that you create a learning target for each of the 3 tasks. That's one option you have, and a 4th for EdTPA vocabulary. Or, as I mentioned before, create them for the 3 of these 5 rubrics, because they are the assessment rubrics. So you have some options of the kind of questions where you should create your questions. I've also found that my students have an aversion to creating reasoning targets and questions. I challenge you to read Chapuis et al. 2012 and I have that in course materials. Which I will go to right now. Course materials, handouts. There's vocabulary in your own words again. This is the hard copy of the reliability and validity quiz. This is the selected response test rubric. This is the EdTPA. This is the EdPTA Making Good Choices. This is Chapuis et al. Chapters 4 and Chapter 5. That will guide you in creating your selected response questions. This is this a trick question, which is another, it's a pamphlet. There's also exemplar selected response tests, which I have 3 of them here. Resources for creating learning targets, how to write behavioral objectives, another article that will help you. Again, there are making the most of multiple choice. This will help you create reasoning questions. So there are all kinds of resources there for you, and take advantage of them. Okay, I've put one in the teaching memo, the written teaching memo. I provided a reasoning question, a sample reasoning question. So look at that. Make sure you take a good look and use that to help you as an example to help you write reasoning questions. As you begin to create your selected response test, be aware of the selected response test rubric, which outlines the requirements. You will have a chance to revise your test before submitting it to me for grading. You're actually going to have a couple of chances to revise your test. The first chance with your discussion board group. I will also give you feedback on your first draft. After you revise that draft, you're going to post it again to a different group, and those folks will give you feedback. So by the time you're ready to submit it for grading, it should be very polished and an excellent test. Continue reading Popham, Chapters 4, Cohen and Spencer, Chapter 5. There's a discussion board. There is no discussion board this week. However, I've made the initial selected response discussion board available for those eager beavers who want to upload their initial draft. So that's it for this week. I look forward to reading your first drafts of your test. So I will see you in 1 week.